Okay, so in this short video, we're going to look at the process of proofreading using ClaraRead in conjunction with Word. Now, I've done something that no student should ever do. I've just stolen a load of text from Wikipedia just to use as an example. So we've got some of an article about James Joyce here. And if we scroll a little bit further down to where the text really gets going, I'm just going to place the cursor into the text here. And the way ClaraRead is set up is that when you have a flashing cursor in Word, you can literally just press the play button at the top of the screen and it should read that back to you. Now, within the settings, I've actually gone and set this up with a Claro voice. So this is Daniel reading back to us at the moment with his default speed settings. Okay, let's have a listen back and see how that works.
In 1904, in his early 20s, Joyce emigrated to continental Europe with his partner, and later wife, Nora Barnacle. Although most of his adult life was spent abroad.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop it there. What I wanted to show you is that by default, ClaraRead will automatically move on to the next sentence, which is great if what you're listening back to is research and you want to turn your speakers on and just, wander around your room and have the article read back to you while you're doing other things. But when you're proofreading, I think it's worth considering the fact that, it is still a computerized voice reading back to you. And maybe you've spent ages and ages working on this essay and really you don't want to introduce anything that is going to make you zone out at all. So what I like to do is just slightly adjust the way the ClaraRead voice works. I go up to settings and I click on this box, stop after sentence. Now what this means is that every time you press play, it's just going to go to the next full stop. You actually have to go up and press play to move it onto the next sentence. So for instance, if I click here and then press play.
In 1904, in his early 20s, Joyce emigrated to continental Europe with his partner, and later wife, Nora Barnacle.
And then it's going to stop at that point. And to move it onto the next sentence, you need to press the play button again.
Although most of his adult life was spent.
Now, the reason that that can be useful to do is that it just keeps you focused on what you've just heard and makes you really consider whether everything in the sentence you've just heard is correct and whether you need to work on it before moving on to the next sentence. Just having that act of needing to go and click on a play button really helps you focus and split up each sentence as you work through it. And as you can see, ClaraRead is pausing when it gets to commas. So if I go in and I remove the commas, and actually if I take out the brackets here as well, this is going to sound quite different.
In 1904, in his early 20s, Joyce emigrated to continental Europe with his partner and later wife Nora Barnacle.
Okay, so I probably should have taken out that first comma for the full effect, but it sounds a lot more robotic. So that is a good thing to look out for. If the voice is sounding very robotic, it's potentially flagging up the fact that you might need to go back to that sentence and put in a bit more punctuation. Now, what you should have also seen is that when you listen back to a sentence, it highlights the whole sentence in blue.
In 1904, in his early...
Okay, we don't need to hear that sentence anymore, but yeah, just to show you there, it's going to highlight the entire sentence. It's going to highlight up to the next full stop. So again, you're getting some visual feedback there. If you press play and a huge chunk of your page goes blue, before you've even heard anything, you know that you've got a very, very long sentence and it's giving you some visual feedback that you might want to go and split that down into fewer sentences. Okay, so here's another chunk of Wikipedia that I have pasted into a Word document, and what I want to show you now is another tool called the homophone checker. Now, first of all, I'm going to try and select this chunk of text, and we're going to see something that ClaraRead does that you might want to modify. Its default setting is to play back any text that you select. So if I do this...
N.I. Fitzgerald, N.E. Inglesby, born the 28th of November.
Now, I've deliberately chosen this text because it's a little bit harder and there's some difficult words in there that ClaraRead is going to struggle a little bit with. But I just wanted to show you that if you select the text, it's going to play that back to you. Now, what I wanted to actually do was start the homophone checker. So actually check this bit of text for words that sound the same as other words but have different meanings. But of course, when I select the text, ClaraRead is going to read that back to me. So if that's something that you don't want ClaraRead to do, you can go into settings, you can go into advanced speech, and you have the option to turn off speak when mouse selects. I generally leave this on, especially when you're working with web documents, but just to show you that you have got some flexibility here to change the way that Clara Reed highlights text, and indeed to modify the colours that it uses to highlight the text as well. I'm just going to turn that off temporarily for now and click on OK. So I'm going to go and select this text and click on this H-Phones button, which stands for homophones. And if I click on Show Homophones, we can see that there's some words that have been highlighted. So this is to demonstrate how it works. I'm going to go and click in the first of those blue words, because it's actually showing words that have the same sound as other words but different meanings. Now, the challenge with these kind of words sometimes is that you might use a spell checker by right-clicking on a word. You might choose a word. It might not actually be the correct version of the word. So you're not going to get a red underline because maybe the born that you meant is different from the born that you've actually typed in. So to clarify this, if I go and click on check now, it'll bring up, it's like a spell checker interface. You've actually got a spell checker interface here on meanings. But if I go to homophones, it's saying, did you mean a baby being born, or did you mean this type of born, which can also mean move while holding up or supporting, or did you mean this type of born, which has a different spelling again, which is an archaic term for a boundary or a goal or destination. So it just gives you that little bit more insight into the language that you're using. You don't even have to look at the Word document, because if you can see down here, you can see the context of your sentence at the bottom, and we've got a couple of definitions here. So if you thought, well, that's the correct version of the word born that I'm using, and you've used born 20 more times, you don't want to have to keep looking at it, you can click on ignore all, and that means the software is going to stop asking you about that word and then move on to the next one. And now we have the classic 2, 2 and 2. And again, if you think that this isn't something which is an issue for you particularly, you can click on ignore all. So we can see it's highlighted a number of different 2s in this paragraph, but if I click on ignore all, it's actually saying that it's finished checking that paragraph now because it's ignored these other ones. So it's also going to pick up on confusable words like practice and practice, or words like affect and effect. So my suggestion would be that you start by listening back to your document using the voice, checking up to make sure that you haven't repeated yourself and that the sentences make sense, that your punctuation is in the right place. Then I'd take a break and maybe come back through with the homophone checker just to check for same sounding words. Now, once you've completed this check, you can always go back up to H-Phones and click on clear homophones, and it's got rid of all the blue text there on your page. Now, the reason I've chosen this document to demonstrate with is that there's some language in it which Clara Reed is going to struggle with. So I'm going to go back up to settings here, I'm going to go into advanced speech, and I'm going to turn back on the feature where you can actually select text to have it read back to you, because sometimes you do want to do that. Okay, I'm going to select this word and let's see how it pronounces it.
Ethne.
So it's reading that word phonetically, even though that isn't the correct pronunciation. What we're finding is that Clara Reed is unable to guess what the actual correct Irish pronunciation of this word should actually be. And this is something that you'll want to know if you're listening back to documents which contain words that don't follow English pronunciation rules. So what I'm going to do is go up to settings, I'm going to go to pronounce, and I'm going to type that spelling in here. Now I know that the correct pronunciation of this word is Enya, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that as a rule. So we can see that rule has now been added up at the top in the list. And what that should mean is that when I get Clara Reed to read it back to me in future, it's going to choose this phonetic pronunciation that I have written into the box there. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK. Let's see how it's done.
Enya.
Okay, that's not quite right, is it? We need to maybe change the phonetic pronunciation a little bit. So back into settings, back into pronounce, and you can actually edit this rule when it's selected. So I'm going to actually go in and try and put in a dash between N and Ya, and we can actually test this out.
Enya.
That's sounding much better. I'm going to click on OK now. I'm going to click on OK again, and let's see how Clara Reed is doing.
Enya.
And there we go. And it's learned that pronunciation, and now it's going to use that pronunciation every time it encounters that word.